practical effect is, and I'd like you to answer this, because Senator Cash raised this issue about women's refuges. There is a women's refuge, a domestic violence refuge, and I'm not going to say where it is, because I don't want to in any way identify them. Men are prohibited to enter the refuge after 10 o'clock for the safety of the women who are residing there with their children. So after 10 o'clock, men are prohibited. So what is happening at this refuge is men are turning up at 9:45, often perpetrators, and they are saying, I identify as a woman, and you are compelled to let me in. And under the current state of the law, this refuge has no choice but to let these men in, with this absolute nonsense which is putting at risk the safety of women who are fleeing family violence and their children. So what do you say to that? How can women have safety in a domestic violence refuge when men are fronting up and saying, I identify as a woman, let me in?
The safety of women and girls is absolutely vitally important in our society.
Well, you are compromising it.
No. Senator Henderson and Senator Cash. We've had a very orderly day today. We will not be changing how we've been working throughout the day, which is
girls is of paramount importance. We know the widespread experience of domestic and family violence by women and girls. I would suggest in that situation that the logical thing to do would be to ring the police. If someone is trying to harm someone within the refuge, then the best response is to call the police. If there is grounds for someone to be arrested, then they will be removed from that refuge.
No, the issue I'm raising, Commissioner Cody, is that men are prohibited from entering this particular refuge after 10 o'clock. They're fronting up at 9:45 at night and saying, I identify as a woman, you are bound to let me in. And the law is now such, compounded by the stance of the Australian Human Rights Commission, that women cannot even feel safe under those circumstances in a domestic violence refuge.
I disagree, Senator. I've made my response.
I was also just wondering if there was a question rather than a statement.
So I guess the question is, what do women do in those circumstances when men, who effectively are lying, they're just concocting some convenient, I identify as a woman at 9:45 at night so they can get into a women's refuge? I mean, that is just completely insane, Commissioner Cody. And I would put to you that the stance of the Human Rights Commission, and I include you, Commissioner, in this, has compounded the safety issues that women and children are now facing in this country.
The focus is harmful behaviour, Senator, and when there is harmful behaviour, such as someone trying to come into a refuge where people are seeking safety, then the best response is to deal with the harmful behaviour, and that is ring the police. If it is a criminal offence, they will be charged.
But there's no legal basis. What's the criminal offence?
Because they are being excluded. They shouldn't, if they're not accepted after 10 p.m. at night, then that's the grounds on which they could be excluded.
In your definition of women, a man has to be included and allowed in. That is the absurdity of this law in this country, which has been prosecuted by the Human Rights Commission. And I've had confidential discussions with the CEO of this refuge. She is beside herself. She has no legal basis to exclude these men.
Okay, very interesting. Call the police. Okay, yeah. The cost of the legislative experiment. This is episode 3, when the two protected characteristics reach the same doorway, the collision. Now, let me just quickly jump to the religious aspect of this. If you get two religions given the same governance, it's going to come to a war. It's going to turn into a war. The Middle East has had religious wars for millenniums. And now what we've basically got is a war, and it's an illegitimate war, because biology should not be competing against ideology. It just shouldn't be. The biology should have the governance, the precedence over ideology. And so the conflict didn't begin when somebody rejected and objected to the transgender ideology. The conflict didn't begin when somebody complained. The conflict didn't begin when somebody went to court. The conflict began the moment two protected characteristics arrived at the same boundary. Because every protected boundary eventually asks a simple question: who belongs inside? And for years, the answer appeared relatively straightforward. And then a second answer arrived, and the doorway suddenly became contested. Most Australians assume the legal protections operate independently. They don't. The difficulty emerges when two protected characteristics claim authority over the same space. At that moment, the legal system must determine which characteristic governs the boundary. That's the collision, because there is no characteristic telling anyone they can govern the boundary. There are no boundaries. Not people, not personalities, not politics, not principles. Imagine a female-only refuge. Why it was created? Why was it created? To exclude people? No. It was created to protect women recovering from trauma, violence, vulnerability, and fear. And the purpose matters. Now imagine a transgender woman seeks access. This is happening. Immediately the conversation changes. One side argues the boundary exists because biological sex is materially relevant to the purpose. The other argues exclusion constitutes discrimination based on gender identity. Notice what happens. Neither side's arguing the same question. It's a completely different context in which they're arguing over. Neither side is arguing the same reason. One's defending the purpose of the boundary, the other's defending the protection from exclusion. So you've got the biological women saying, this is as far as you can go. But the trans people are saying, no, I want to cross over. I want to come in there. And the women have said, you can have everything. You can, be whatever you want, but don't cross our boundaries. But that's not enough for the transgenderists. They want the lot. It just keeps coming back to that. They want the lot. And they should have never been allowed to have that governance. So both claims are now standing at the same doorway. One's saying that's as far as you'll go. The other's saying, no, it's not. One's saying that's as far as you can go on legitimate grounds. The other's saying, no, it's not, on legal grounds. On the premise of the law, I can come in. Not on the premise of principle, on the premise of law, I'm coming in. And this is where many Australians become confused, because both protections appear legitimate, both protections exist in the law, both protections seek recognition. Yet the boundary cannot be governed by two competing characteristics simultaneously, because they both have the same rights. One to say, they both, when you think about it, they haven't got the same rights. Because the women are standing there and saying, this is as far as you'll go, right? This is as far as we ask you to go. But the transgenderists are saying, no, according to the law, I'm coming in. I'm coming in. Now, whether they're meaning to do any damage or malice or not, That's not what the point is. The point is the women are saying, look, under the circumstances, given the reason for this being here, could you give us the dignity and respect to just leave us alone? But the transgenderists are not respecting that. They're saying, I've got lawful rights and I'm going to apply them despite how you feel, despite how you perceive me, despite what it does to you when I come in, whether I'm up the hallway in another room or not. So it's not about exclusion, it's about respect, right? The whole level of respect is caved in, consequential to the law. Now, I'm not saying women have lost respect towards a transgenderist, but there is, in a lot of ways, a lot of people starting to arc up and say, hang on a minute, this isn't cricket. But the transgenderists are not respecting that one bit that the women are asking for, just that one part, their privacy. So eventually the law is going to have to determine which characteristic controls access. And that's where the collision becomes unavoidable, because the deeper question's not who deserves protection. The deeper question is what characteristic created the need for the protection in the first place. And this matters because legal categories are not supposed to be arbitrary. A maternity service exists because pregnancy matters. This has gone so far, viewers, as to be able to say, a male identifying as a woman can go into what's that thing where they have the thing on their belly to see if they're pregnant? They can book in and go in and have the whatever it is to see if the baby's there, and the people have to do it, even though there's not even a womb. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, this has gone so far. This is how ridiculous it is. This is where we're up to with it. You can be a male and put a doll under your shirt, walk into the hospital and say, I'm about to give birth. Can you help me? Hop onto a hospital table and feign a birth. That's where it's up to. Otherwise, you're discriminating against that person. Ultrasound. A male can book in for an ultrasound and they have to give the ultrasound. Just like a male can come up to the identifying as a woman, the refuge, and they have to let that person in. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to pick sides, or I'm just saying this is where these boundaries go. Okay, so Sharia law gets in. All of a sudden, we're demanding that women get circumcised. And the Australians are going, hang on a minute, no, that's not what we signed up for. But the Sharia law is going, that's what we do. This is what's happened. And there's nothing under the law protecting anybody from this happening. A child service exists because age matters. A blindness service exists because blindness matters. Basically, when you think about it, I can come up to okay, this is just the gender part of it. Let's just look at a parallel example. I can go up to a blind place and say I'm blind, and they have to let me in. It's exactly the same thing on a different level. The protected characteristic and the purpose remain connected, and many women therefore ask, if a female-only boundary exists because biological sex matters, should biological sex continue governing that boundary? Because that governance has been stripped off them. And the question sits beneath almost every modern dispute: sport, privacy, refuges, support groups, associations, prisons. The location changes, but the collision remains the same. Because every case arrives eventually at the identical question: which characteristic has governance at the doorway? Who has the authority? Well, under this law, neither. The woman will stand there and say, that's as far as look, I've shared everything else with you. Everything. I've got nothing else to offer you. I just need my privacy. That's all I'm asking you for. The dignity and the respect, just to give me my private space. And the transgenderists are going, no. And once that question appears, the public discovers something unsettling. The law may recognise multiple protected characteristics, but when they collide, somebody must decide which principle controls the boundary. And that decision determines whether the boundary remains what it originally was designed to be and put there for, or it becomes something else, and it's become something else. This is my final consequential statement for this episode. The modern conflict's not fundamentally about personalities, activists, or court cases. It's about what happens when two protected characteristics claim authority over the same protected space. And the moment that occurs, the legal system must answer a question Parliament never fully settled. They never thought of all this. Which characteristic governs the boundary? Because until that question is answered, these collisions at the expense of biological women remain unresolved. I'll see you in the next take.